Hello and welcome to the last part of the Diamond Reflections lace along, and in this part we now need to join up our end of our lace to the start of our lace. Then we're going to stiffen the lace and then we're going to create the shape. So the first thing I need to do is to join all my ends into the start. Now I never join at the end because generally you will have more than one pair at the end of your lace. So I tend to pick the points along my lace where you can definitely see the pair goes in. And what I mean by that is if you hold your pair across, you can see that this pair here definitely goes into that pin. It doesn't go over there and it doesn't go over there. So this is what I call a definite place. The other thing I also always do is make sure that I've got an extra twist on my pair, because sometimes, and unfortunately I can't work out how or why, because you only notice it when you've done it, not whilst you're doing it, but sometimes the twist comes off the pair. So if you just had the one twist, what you would end up with are two threads going into this pinhole, and you want a single line like all the rest of your lace. So let me do that again, 1 2. So there's the extra twist. So if you've got something like a honeycomb, I would still put the extra twist on. So normally with a honeycomb you have 2 twists, you put the extra on and it has 3. So even if it loses one of them, you've still got the 2. So I've now worked out where my pair is going. So I'm going to lift the pin out, and you'll have to bear with me a minute because I'm working at a distance, so I don't get my head in the shot so you can see everything. So there's my pin. I'll just try and grab it. There it is. And what you should have, because if you started with 2 twists, is a nice loop. So I am going to put my Lazy Susan down that loop with my Lazy Susan. I'm going to go down the loop, and I'll just explain what a Lazy Susan is in a minute, as I don't want to have to redo this sewing. So I've put my Lazy Susan down the loop. I'm going to pull it back slightly, and by pulling it back, there's friction on these 2 threads and it pulls the thread on the Lazy Susan up a bit. So I've now got a loop that I can grab hold of, take my Lazy Susan out, and because I've got my loop on my pin, I've still got it. So that's the first part of my sewing. Now if you were doing it with a crochet hook, you would go through the loop exactly the same, but you would catch one of the threads with the crochet hook. Now my loop is on the left hand side, so I always put the closest bobbin down my loop. So I'm going to pop that one, lengthen it because it makes your life easier. Then you're going to pull the loop back up. I'm just going to catch the loop in my Lazy Susan because you've got so many pins around this area that the threads are going to catch on every single pin. And I've moved my bobbin over to the left, so let me just pull it through. There we go. Now because this is a single loop, I can take the thread of my Lazy Susan out, trying to do it without losing the thread off of my Lazy Susan. And what you're left with is the loop of your bobbin. Now quite often, it hasn't done it on here, let me pop a couple on. Quite often when you pull this loop through, you will end up with twists on this thread here. You want to make sure they are removed because they will won't allow the thread to pull down neatly, because the loops will be there in between that and your sewing. So I now have my loop. I don't have any twists on it at all, and all I'm going to do is pop the other bobbin through like so, catching on every pin. Then I'm going to hold on to my loop with my Lazy Susan and pull the other bobbin down, and that way you catch on no other threads. So that thread is now in your that thread is now in the start. That end thread has come through. The next thing you have to remember is to put the pin back. Now if you pull the threads of your pair you've just sewn to the back, it opens up the pinhole. So I'm just going to now it's going to be a lot easier for you because you'll be able to get close up and see it, but I'm, like I said, I'm working from a distance. Okay, so I've now replaced my pinhole. That is really important because it gives the knot, when you tie your reef knot, it gives the knot something to tension against. So, and especially if you're in half stitch will always pull when you're doing sewing, so you need to have all the pins around it and you need to have the pin back in the pinhole. So that's my first pair sewn in. So let me do that again. Now before I do that, let me just explain my Lazy Susan, because this for me was a lifesaver. So your Lazy Susan is a tool which has the eye of the needle coming out of it. So that enables you to put a piece of thread through that eye of the needle, which then will go through the hole. You can catch a loop and you can put your pair through the loop. Personally, it's a much safer choice because I was forever shredding my thread with the crochet hook. So as soon as I learned how to use a Lazy Susan, I've never done sewings really with a crochet hook since. Okay, so let's do the next one. So I'm going to move up to here because I want to show you your magic thread. So you lift up your pin with my really handy pin lifter. There we go. Now if you ever lose the pinhole, aim to get your pin back in, and then you want to give it a wiggle like that, and that will reopen up your pinhole for you. So the other thing I also want to say is that I generally actually have a longer thread on my Lazy Susan than this. So yeah, that's quite short for me. Okay, so you're going to go push the Lazy Susan through the loop of your pinhole. Don't try and come up because it's a little bit more difficult because you've got to get underneath the loop and the loop moves. So ideally I would try going down. Coming up I would leave as a last resort because sometimes it might work, sometimes it won't. So you push your Lazy Susan through, pull back slightly, which then creates the loop. And this is the only time I will use a pin near a piece of my thread, is if it's the Lazy Susan thread. Pull your loop up. Now I've put my Lazy Susan to the left of my pair. It doesn't matter, but what I would do is always put the bobbin that's closest to the Lazy Susan down the loop. So I've lengthened off my bobbin, pop it down through the loop, and then you can hold on to the loop until it's fairly close, and then I put my bobbin over to the left because I want to pull my loop up to the right, and then you just pull it through. Now if you have any problems pulling the loop through, which is likely to happen when you're using a pair, if you just stroke it with your thumbnail like that, it will encourage the thread to come up. Once you've got your loop, take out your Lazy Susan, make sure you have no twists on this bottom of this loop, and once you're happy, and I tell you what I haven't done, or did I do it? Yeah, it looks like I've got the extra twist. I forgot to say about the extra twist. Put the other bobbin through the loop, then put your Lazy Susan in the loop and guide it down, and it's so much easier. So that's my second pair sewn in. I'm going to lay my pair to the back, and you can see here it opens up the hole. Grab my pin and then locate the pinhole, and if you can't find it, just make a new one. Put the pin in and then push it back down again. There we go. So that's my second pair sewn in. Now, one of the things you will have noticed is that I haven't tied any of my bobbins. I do not tie my bobbins until I am positive that everything is sewn in correctly. The other reason I haven't tied any of my bobbins is because these sew-ins are going to be seen, because the diamond reflection can twirl round. So I'm going to finish off with a Bruges finish, which means that all the knots, the Bruges finish creates a chain stitch across the back, and all the knots are underneath the chain stitch. So it's not quite as, it doesn't show quite as much as the just tying it in a reef knot. If you want to tie it in a reef knot, that's fine. But again, I always tie my reef knots until I've sewn everything in and I am positive that everything goes in the right place. So I'm going to show you one more time before I get to my magic thread. So this pair definitely goes in over here because it goes diagonally. Extra twist. Then I can remove my pin with my pin lifter upper. You're going to do this a lot easier than I am because I'm so far away and the eyesight's just rubbish these days. Okay, so there's my loop on my stitch. So I'm going to put my Lazy Susan down, pull it back slightly, and you can see your threads rise up. Catch, it doesn't matter whether you catch both threads or just a single thread. I generally go for a single one because otherwise I'd be there for a little while trying to catch both of them. Okay, so there's my loop. I'm just checking I've got my 2 twists on. I have. Lengthen one bobbin, the closest one to the loop, put it down the loop, pull the ends of your Lazy Susan. Now when you're pulling it, make sure you've got both ends, because if you don't, the thread will just literally pull out. So pull it through, put your bobbin over to the side, to the other side where your thread is coming up. So because my thread is coming up to the right, I've put my bobbin over to the left. Once you've got your loop out, you can take your Lazy Susan, check the bottom of your loop for any twists, move the pin out of the way, put your other bobbin through, and then I always tend to put my Lazy Susan in this loop because it's going to stop, see, it stops it catching on every single pin on the way down. Okay, so hold your both the threads to the back and it opens up your loop. Pop your pin back in and that's your sewing done. So that's 3 pairs already in. So now we're at the edge, and I know these have all come in correctly because they're going in their nice diagonal lines. And on this edge, we put in a magic thread. So just pull your magic thread carefully. You have to do this carefully because if you pull this magic thread out, you will have to try and catch 2 loops on your with your Lazy Susan or your crochet hook. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure it flosses. By that I mean I'm going to hold both ends and see if it moves, and it does. So that's a good sign. So I'm going to now take out my pin, and you can see that now moves freely. So I'm now going to move everything over to the right. I'm going to make sure I've got, should have twists on everything. And I'm going to use this outside pair. And this time, because we're sewing 3 into this pinhole, I'm going to make the loop. Up until this point, we've been making the loop with 1 bobbin, but this time I am going to make the loop with 1 pair, because I need to be able to put the other 2 through. So I'm going to put both of them through my magic thread loop in the same order, so you can see there. And then I'm going to pull my magic thread ends, not the loop, just going to guide that down. Okay, now this is the point where take the tension off of your pair that you've put through the loop. And this is the point where you might find you have difficulty because you're trying to get 2 threads through 2 loops. So this is the point where if you just take your fingernail and just, I'm hoping you can see that, just give it a stroke, hopefully it will pull up. Is it coming? Okay, I'm just going to pull my threads up slightly. Okay, so it's not coming through cleanly, and I think it's because it's trying to pull four threads through. Okay, so I've just lifted up the threads on this end pair, so it's got less thread to now pull up through. There we go. So if you find it doesn't come through, move the magic thread down the pair that you've the threads of the pair you've put through. Don't have it really close. Having it really close meant that it caught in as well. It was trying to pull through this pair as well as the pair that I wanted it to. Now I've got a loop here that is big enough to now get my Lazy Susan into, and I will now use my Lazy Susan to pull up my threads or my fingers, because this thread is only sewing cotton, so as soon as you've got a loop that's big enough. Now the other thing I have done is I am leaving my magic thread loop in, because at the moment I've got a little bit of a muddle as to where my threads are going, and ideally I want to make sure that my threads all come through cleanly, and I think it's because I've got a twist. Can you see all those twists? So I'm just undoing those, so I've got a nice clean loop. Let me just check what's going on here. So what you're after is both of the loops being in the same direction. There we go. That's it. There we are. So can you see here, look, my loop, both of the threads are in the right direction, because my loop is there of my magic thread, and you can see it running cleanly through. What you don't want to do is to take this magic thread out and get into a bit of a muddle with your loops here, because if you put bobbins down through in the wrong direction, it's not going to go cleanly, and it'll just end up being a sewing that you have to abandon and take it out completely. So that's my magic thread. So my magic thread has basically done the work of the thread on my Lazy Susan, without having to find a pinhole, because it was already put in the pinhole at the start. So now I'm going to lengthen my other bobbins and put them through this loop in their pairs. So I'm going to do my Gold Rush first. That's 1 pair. Then I'm going to do my other pair, and these should all have their 2 twists on them. That's it. Okay, so now I have got 4 pairs through my loop, and I am happy that they have all gone through in the same direction neatly. So now I can take out my magic thread and pop it away for the next time. And then I'm going to put my Lazy Susan in this loop and pull it down. And the reason I tend to use my Lazy Susan is because the Lazy Susan is actually smaller than my fingers, and it's still caught on some pins. So let me just, it's just caught on this one here. There we go. So I think actually it's probably the ones that have gone through the loop. I hope it's not that one. It's this pair. And whenever you're playing around with your loops, do keep the tension off of the thread, because if you've got tension in your thread and you're trying to pull one thread through and you can't, it's because it's all tensioned up. Okay, I've got a loop. I'm just going to see, where's that loop coming from? Nothing's moving. So I just pop that over there. So you can see, even with the best willing, you still end up with little things that happen. So okay, so that loop is not moving at all, so I do not know which thread it is at the moment. So I'm just going to try and lift up this thread. I am assuming it's coming from the thread that made the loop. So I'm just going to lift up with my Lazy Susan, because if it had been this pair it would move. So I think this is probably where the twisting has occurred. Oh, there we go. It's that one. Just needed a little bit more welly. There we go. Okay, so that's it now in tight. And again, if you can put the pin back in, but you're going to need to hold all three. And I'm just going to aim for, no, I'm not going to see a loop on this one, but I'm just going to see if I can pop it down. The only problem is that you might split the thread, so I'm just going to leave that one because it's quite solid. You're not going to be able to get a pin in there. So but have a go. I usually say give it a couple of goes, and then if it doesn't work, then don't panic. It's fine because it'll be supported by the other pins. And I will try again when I can look a little bit closer. So that's now my magic thread done, my 3 pairs, and I can carry on down adding my pairs, but I'm just going to ignore those all for the minute. I'm going to put them back on my stitch holders in their pairs, but I'm now going to move everything across here because again we have on this end here we're going to have 2 pairs to go in on that pin there, because the previous pair will go in on that pin and these 2 will go on this pin. Let me just check this. So just pull out the next little lot. Okay, so it's always a good idea not to second guess this. So I'm just pulled out these. So this pair here, let me move them aside for a minute, is going to go across to there. So that's that one sorted. This pair here can go, so we got that one going across diagonally to that one. This one in to this pin here. And this pair, so we have 3 pairs going in on that pin there. So again, what I would suggest you do is to start further down. Don't go for this pin straight away. Work further down, so you, and then work either upwards or downwards to these gimp pairs, because you're dealing with more than one pair. Always sew in sort of, I always start in the middle and either work up or down, where you're going to have to work both up and down, but start in the middle so you know that's definitely going to that pin, then work back up, then you'll have all the pairs for this pinhole here, and then work all the way down and you'll have all the pairs for that last pinhole. So I'm going to second guess myself so I can show you how to sew in 2 pairs on the same pin, because these gold rushes don't have a pin of their own. They're surplus. Whenever you do a gimp threads don't have pinholes. They just sort of go hang around in between pins. So it's going to be the same with your gold rush. So I'm just going to double check. This one definitely goes into here. So that means that these two have to go into this pinhole here. Now I'm going to move everything over, because whenever I do a sew in, if I have a metallic, always do the sew in, if you can, with a cotton thread, because it's smooth. It's going to be a lot easier to get my cotton thread up through this hole than it is my gold rush, because of all the bumps on the gold rush. So that's why I'm moving everything over to the left, so that I can then use this pair to make the loop to do the sewing. So I'm going into this pinhole. No, I'm going into that pinhole. Yeah. This is the other reason I don't tie anything off, because that way then, if things aren't sewn in the correct place, you can then just undo the sewing. You don't have to undo the knot, and even worse, if you've cut your pairs off close to your work, because that's the other thing I will not do. I will not cut my threads off close to my work until it is off the pillow. If you've tied your reef knot, cut your ends off really close, and then you find that you're actually in the wrong pinhole, you're a little bit snookered, because your threads won't be long enough to put back on a bobbin because you've cut them off close. And in theory, you're probably going to have to undo a whole load, put in a new pair, and then redo it. So it's going to save you work in the long run. Okay, so my bobbin is going over here, so I've just going to put that on the left. I'm going to make sure my ends are all together before I put my Lazy Susan through. Down the pinhole, pull it back slightly, there's your loop, pull it up, that's it. Now we need to, because we're dealing with 2 pairs, sewing 2 pairs in, I need to make a loop with 1 pair. So I'm going to lengthen that pair, pop it down through my loop or my Lazy Susan, make sure I hold these 2 ends here, take the tension off my threads, and then carefully pull it up. So there we go. Can you see there's a little bit of gap? Lost my Lazy Susan thread. A little bit of gap here, and that's ideally what you want, if not a little bit bigger. There we go, because that gives it something to actually pull up. It'll tighten up, but you do not want it really tight, because it's going to make life really difficult. So I've moved my bobbins over to the right, because the next pair I've got to put through on my gold rush. I've left my loop in my my Lazy Susan thread in my loop, because then I've got I can track where that thread is and which loops are in which direction, and everything's sitting really nicely. But there will be times when it doesn't. Put an extra twist on my gold rush, thread your pair down through, and I don't pull anything up until I am positive that my threads have gone through. So then I can, once I'm happy, I can take out my Lazy Susan thread, put my Lazy Susan in my hole, actually pull the correct pair down, and can you see that Lazy Susan is so much thinner than my fingers, and there's my pairs sewn in on that pin. Okay, now normally I'm just going to pull these to the back and get my pin back in. It's a little bit easier when you've only got 2 pairs, Okay, so normally when I've sewn 2 pairs in, and if I'm just tying an ordinary reef knot, let me just try and get this pin back in and I'll show you. It's in there somewhere. Come on, there we go. Okay, so normally when I do my sewing in and I've got 2 pairs and I need to do my reef knot, this pair, this is actually quite easy to show you because you can see because of the different colors. This pair is the pair that I've put through my loop. So if I tie a reef knot, the reef knot will sit this side of my loop, but it's not actually very secure because if this loop gets a little bit loose, that reef knot could slide straight up through this loop. It's all about the loops. So in order to counteract that, when I have 2 pairs that I've sewn in and I want to tie a reef knot, I mix my pairs up, because that way then if I just move that bobbin over to there, if I tie a reef knot with this pair, that's one of the ones that made the loop and one of the bobbins that went through the loop, that then secures it because this thread is then attached to this thread. And if I do the same with this pair, this one is attached, this gold rush is attached to this thread. So the chances of it coming back up through the loop are pretty minimal because they're actually attached to one of the bobbins that made the loop. I have to say this has never happened to me, but I'm not taking the risk because especially if you're manhandling the lace, although this is going to be stiffened, you will be folding it round, and if you are taking it apart and laying it flat for storage, you'll then go back to it the following year and remake it, reshape it. So there is going to be a little bit of manhandling, and I don't want to take the risk. I've spent so long making this, just for the sake of splitting up my pairs, I'm not going to take the risk. So that's one of the handy hints. It won't be relevant in this because we're doing the Bruges finish, and you'll see that when we get to it. So the next pin is more than likely to have 3 pairs on it, but again, start in the middle and work back up to it, and then down to the bottom should only be 2. So I'm going to go off sewing all my pairs, hopefully find out I haven't sewn any in the wrong place, but you never know. And then I will be back to show you how to do the Bruges finish, which is a really pretty finish, but it does take a little bit of working out. I have now finished sewing in all of my pairs, and I ended up sewing 3 pairs into 1 pinhole at the inner edge. The other thing I have done is I have pushed down all of my pins. Now one of the things I would just say about sewing in is I know a lot of people actually really hate sewing in. However, if you've done that 2 twists on your worker pair in the trail at the start, it does make life a lot easier because it creates a bigger loop for you to sew into, so it does make it easier. The other thing is also do it in small batches. So say sew in 5 pairs, then go off and do something else for a little while, and then come back and sew in the next 5. Don't sit down and do it all in one go because you'll definitely get backache and neck ache. So it's sort of a little and often job, I call it. So we're now ready to finish off by tying our reef knots. Now if you want to go ahead and tie all of the pairs in a single reef knot, that's fine. Just remember that if you've sewn in more than 1 pair on the edge into a single pinhole, to split the pairs up and sew them, tie them with one of the ones that made the loop and one of the others, or vice versa. It sort of make sure you don't tie them in their pairs, is what I'm trying to say. The other alternative is to work a Bruges finish. Now, the Bruges finish creates a chain effect across the back of your work, and because of the direction you put your bobbins down in, the bobbins appear as if they're coming out from underneath the chain. So it's quite good at hiding the knots. Now, to do the Bruges finish, you need to have all the pairs sewn in. You can't do a little bit and then do the Bruges finish. You need to have all the pairs sewn in. The other thing you need to know is the direction in which you're going. Now, I always work from the outside to the inside. So that means that I'm working from the left hand edge to the right hand edge. And whichever direction you're going, so I'm going from left to right, I need to tie the first part of my reef knot in the opposite direction. So because I'm going from left to right, I'm going to tie my reef knot right over left, okay? Because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing a reef knot with every single bobbin. So let me show you that in action. So this is my first pair, the pair that's on my edge, and I always put my bobbins upright. I don't know why, but that's how I do it. So I'm now going to tie. I know I need to tie this right over left. So I'm going to put my bobbin in my right hand, make sure there are no twists on this pair. And then I'm going to tie the right hand bobbin over the left. So I'm going to stand them up, lay my right bobbin over my left, put my thread over the end of my right bobbin, so I create a loop, and then pull the thread up. And I'm going to pull the thread up, walking my hands down the thread. Okay, so that's my first reef, half of my reef knot, because my reef knot comes in two parts, right over left, left over right, or vice versa, but we're doing right over left. I'm now going to lift up my left hand and place the bobbin in my right hand underneath that thread. Okay, then I'm going to pick up the next bobbin. So I've still got this bobbin in my left hand. Just double check that you're picking up the one that's right and there's no twists up in the middle. I'm then going to repeat that again. So I'm going to put my right hand bobbin over my left bobbin, put my thread round and pull it. And then I'm going to walk the knot up with my fingers. Lift up my left hand and slide my bobbin underneath, and it's likely to catch on pins. Okay, now the first thing you will have noticed is that this left hand bobbin has swapped. So originally the left hand bobbin was this musical instrument, then it was this one, and now it is one of my Gold Rush. This is the correct method of doing your Bruges finish. So you'll pick up the next bobbin, and this one's going to be slightly awkward because they're both the same. Put your right bobbin over your left, slide the thread around and walk your knot down with your fingers. Lift your left hand and slide the bobbin underneath. Find your next one. And again, make sure there's no twists on it. So that one looks about right. Just bear in mind, they're likely to catch on every single pin. So now, if you keep an eye on my bobbins, you'll notice that this bobbin that is in my right hand will move to my left hand. So right bobbin over left, put the thread around, pull your thread down and walk your knot down. Lift your left hand and slide your bobbin underneath. And I'm back with a white. Now, if you ever need to put this bobbin down, put a pin in it. This means, by putting the pin in, it means that you won't lose this one, because this one is the one that has to work the next stitch. So you then find your next bobbin. So just have a check on your threads, and it's this one. So keep an eye on the bobbins. So right over left, put the thread around, walk your knot down. Now you're not going to see anything at the moment. Lift your left bobbin and slide your bobbin underneath. Then you want to pick up the next one and try and pick it up, don't drop it across your lace pillow. Okay, so right over left, put your thread around, walk your knot down. Now by walking your knot down, you're not pulling from way back over here, you have more control. Things are more likely to break, the threads are more likely to break if you're pulling from your bobbins, because where you're pulling is way back over here, not close to the knot. So we're going to lift our left hand again, slide our bobbin underneath, and then we're going to take our next one. So this is going to be the pattern all the way along the row. So right bobbin over left, put the thread around, slide the knot off, and then walk it down. Lift your left hand and slide the bobbin underneath. Take the next one, and if you pay particular attention as to which bobbin is which, that way then you can keep an eye that this bobbin in the left hand is swapping places with the bobbin in the right. So right over left, put your thread around, walk your knot down, lift your left hand and slide the pair underneath. The other thing you will probably want to do as well is to start putting them back on your stitch holders, and ideally if you can do that in the same order, that will make life a little bit easier. You won't have to hunt for it then. So that's my first few done. I can come back because I put my berry pin in this pinhole, this spangle. I know this is my bobbin, so I can just take that out and carry on with the next bobbin. Right over left, thread around and pull it, walk your knot down. Lift your left hand and slide the bobbin underneath. So you want to go all the way down to the end, and when you get to the last bobbin, it's going to change slightly. So I'm just going to go off and do that, and then I'll come back and show you what to do at the end. I've now got the last 3 pairs to work through, so I'm just still doing my right over left and round. Just keep an eye on what is going on with your pins, because these are likely to get caught around every pin. And don't panic if this looks really messy at this point, because it hasn't been tensioned up at the moment, so it will look a little bit odd. And the other thing I really wanted to clarify was that when you walk your hands down, make sure you do it from above the lace, not along the edge. So let me just show you. So don't be tempted to, I have a feeling I was doing that at the start, but you need to really get it in close to the pin. Okay, let me just grab that. Okay, so this is my last bobbin to go through, so I'm going to do my right over left as I have been doing and pull it in tight. And normally you would lift your left hand and put it underneath. However, we've got no more bobbins to work, so instead we've done our right over left, and now we're going to be going from right to left. So we need to tie our reef knot left over right. So I'm going to put my left bobbin over the top of my right, put the thread around, and then pull down, walk my hands down. And now this time we're going to lift up our right hand and put the bobbin in our left hand underneath. Then we're going to take the next one and we're going to do left over right. So my left bobbin goes over the top of my right bobbin, put the thread around and then pull down. Then lift your right hand and put the bobbin underneath from the left hand. Take the next bobbin And this is the point where you're probably tempted to do right over left, but it's not. It's left over right. Put the thread around, then walk your knot down, lift your right hand, put the bobbin underneath. Take the next one, left over right, thread around, and walk your knot down. Lift your right hand, put the pair bobbin underneath. Take the next bobbin. Now this is where it's really nice if you've popped them on your stitch holders, because it's just literally the next one along. So left over right, put your thread around, walk your stitch down. Lift your right hand, put the bobbin underneath. So at the moment I've got Astrid's bobbin. So that's in my right hand, and I've got dots in my left. So put your left bobbin over the top, put your thread over, walk your knot down, lift your right hand and put the bobbin underneath. And you'll see I've switched bobbins again. So it's really important that the bobbin goes underneath, not over the top, because it's the underneath that creates the thread to go underneath the chain stitch. So now work all the way back through all of your pairs, and I'll meet you at the other end. I just wanted to show you what it looks like when you don't quite pick up the right bobbin. So at the moment I have come through and I have worked 2 pairs, but I've left this bobbin behind. Sorry, I've worked 2 bobbins, but I've left this one behind because it got tangled up. So you do need to pay particular attention to what is going on with the pins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo the knots on the 2 bobbins. So this should be fairly easy because you've been doing your reef knot. So I'm going to just undo this one, which will make this bobbin my right hand bobbin. So I shall undo that one. Then I will undo the next one. So where is it? So it's just literally using your Lazy Susan, popping the knot in. So can you see this bobbin here should have been worked before those 2, and it wasn't. It was ignored completely. So just keep an eye on that. So that's the bobbin that needs to go down next, and this is the one that should have been worked. Can you see it's the next one in line? I think that's it. So it's quite simple to just take it back, but just keep an eye on what's getting caught around pins. And you can now see, you should be able to see, it probably looks a little bit messy, but what you get is this chain stitch across the back, and you get larger chains and then smaller chains because of the bobbins where they are and because of the in between the stitches. So I've retrieved my work back and I need to do this one next. So I'm going to do left over right, tighten up, lift my right bobbin, and off I go again. So just keep an eye on where your bobbins are in relation to pins and to which one is next. I am now left with just 3 bobbins, so I'm going to do my last red one. Left over right, lift up the right hand, place the bobbin underneath. Then the next one, left over right, lift up the right hand and put the bobbin underneath. And now I'm at my last one, so I'm going to do my left over right, and then I'm not going to lift up my arm, I'm then going to do right over left. So at the end, both ends, you will have a complete reef knot. And that is your lace finished. And now we just need to cut off everything. Now I always cut off everything with a length, and the next stage is to stiffen it. Before you start stiffening your lace, if you haven't stiffened it before, then what I would suggest is making a pile of threads on, this is just greaseproof paper, and literally just when you've cut your bobbins off, take the thread off, make a pile, add one of your beads and have a practice run through with the lace stiffener. It's really more for the bead because the finish might come away from the bead, but you want to just double check your bead will be fine with the stiffening. So I would advise trying it first, just using one bead and seeing what happens. I've now cut all of my bobbins off and I've left my lengths of my threads. This means that I can then lift them up and get my paintbrush around the bottom of the knots. I've also tied the 3 pairs that I left out over here in a reef knot, so they're all ready to go, and I'm ready to now stiffen my lace. So the stiffener that I use is called Super Starch, and it's designed specifically for lace. It looks like a big pot, and it does last quite a while. It is a little bit pricey, but it's what I've used on all of my lace angels, and I have to say that my lace angel that was designed in 2010 is just as stiff as it was then, so it is worth its weight in gold. So what I have done is I have watered it down. Now I've put 2 teaspoons in of the super starch, and then I've sort of roughly done about 1.5, so it's slightly thicker than normal, because I want this to be really stiff to keep its shape. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to oh, let me just tell you about the paintbrush. So this paintbrush is only ever used for stiffening my lace. One of my students actually used it on fabric, and the dye came out of the fabric and transferred over to her lace. So I would recommend having a paintbrush that is just specifically for lace. The other thing I would also suggest is try not to get a cheap one, because the bristles come out and they'll end up on your lace. And the other thing is that when you rinse out your brush, I've been told that I have to leave it to dry on its side, not upright, because otherwise all the water ends up in this metal part. So place it on its side and let it air dry that way. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to load up my brush, and then I'm going to start adding it. I'm going to start here. So I've got my ends of my lace, and all I'm going to do is just lift them up and paint this stiffener on. I'm going to pay particular attention to where my knots are, and it's just literally, you're just applying it quite a lot, because what I'm going to do afterwards, so let me just do this bit. I'm going to pick up these ones. So as you can see, they're a little bit tricky because they're all over the place. So you're just literally making sure that the stiffener gets down into the knots, which is why I leave mine with a length. So that's it. Just now, one of the things I would suggest is not having a cup of tea while you're doing this, because believe me, the amount of times I have actually put my paintbrush in my tea and not my stiffener is unbelievable. The other thing that you want to do is leave yourself a good hour and a half, because I left my I stiffened it, dried it, and left the pins in literally 24 hours, and I had a couple of rust stains. So I didn't think any of my pins were bent, because normally I replace my bent pins. But yeah, hour and a half, so you can paint the stiffener on, then you can take out the pins. So that is basically what you're going to be doing. And then once you've you're happy that you've put all of the stiffener on all of the lace, you're going to take some kitchen roll and you're just going to damp it, pat it over, take off all the excess, and then once you've done that, you're going to get a hairdryer. This is the only time I use my hairdryer, and you're going to hairdry it dry. Once it's dry, you then want to remove all of the pins, and then we'll be ready to put it together. I have now reached the point where I am about to take my lace off, and I just wanted to cover a few things about pins. So when I pull my pins out, I leave my corner pins because it saves the lace from rolling up. The other thing that you want to do is that you will notice that one of your hands, generally the hand that has the tool, sits on the lace. So ideally you don't want to have any of the lace that you've taken the pins out already sitting underneath your hand. So I always tend to, because I have the tool in my right hand, I tend to work around anti-clockwise. If you're left-handed, you might find it's the other direction. But ideally you want to have your hand resting on the pins, not the lace. That way then the lace won't be disturbed. And the other thing I want to say is that I know this takes a lot of pins. This pin pot here was empty before I took out all the pins. If you are tempted to take any pins out whilst you're working it, make sure you leave the edge pins. So the edge here, here, on this bit and this bit. The rest of the lace, make sure you take the pins out evenly. But I would only take the pins out after 24 hours because that gives your thread the time for it to settle its thread memory. And what I mean by that is, can you see how this lace, this thread is all curly? Because it's been sitting on my lace bobbin for quite a while, its thread memory is now set as that curl. And the same will happen with your lace. It just settles all the threads down. So I'm now ready to take out, I've taken all my pins out apart from my edge pins, and I'm ready to take them out. So I'm just going to pull them out. So these are the ones that I've just raised slightly just to make it quicker. Now, the thing I will just say is I have had a couple of little orange marks. So this corner here, I've got a little yellow orangey mark, and that's literally just within, I literally stiffened it, took the pins out straight away. So that has happened within an hour. So you can understand why. I'm going to get a close-up of that once it's off. The other thing I would say is, as you take out any pins, bin any bent pins. Do not put your bent pins back in your pin pot. Okay, oh, I've got one here. The other thing I'm going to say is take your lace off slowly, because no matter how thorough you think you've been, the chances are you've probably left another pin in. So I'm just lifting it very, very gently, because, oh, there we are, there's one there. So just don't be tempted to just pull it straight off, just lift it gently. It will feel like it's stuck to the pricking, but that is the stiffener. So there's another one. So as you can see, oh, there's another one. I thought I was doing really well. Okay. Hey, there we go. Okay, now let me just show you close up this little yellow. Let me hold it over there. There's my little yellow mark there. Okay, so that is literally an hour from stiffening it to taking the pins out. So this is what I mean. It's quite a daunting task, but it's worth doing. And then you can see, there we go, both sides. There's my gimp on that side and my gimp on that side, and you can see the whole gimp both sides. So now the next stage, trim my threads. I always trim when I take it off the pillow. and then we can put it together and then we're done. I'm now ready to put the final touches to my diamond reflections. Now I've found this hanger for the middle, but it's got gold thread, so I'm just going to cut off and remove that. It also has a gold bead at the bottom, so I've got a 4mm bead here that I've put onto some thread, white thread, and then I'm just going to thread up through the big bead and then the smaller bead, and the 4mm just leaves the it just means that it doesn't go through the hole, so it just sits there. And I'm just going to slide up there, so that's all ready to now put in the middle of my diamond reflections. Now I've already done it because it really is a two-man job. So if you can get somebody to hold the end, and then you'll be able to just sew one end through one direction and the other through the other direction, so it does that, and then tie a reef knot. And then I also gave it a spot of the stiffener to ensure that it was secure, and trimmed it. The other thing that I've done is that I made a loop from the last two gimp threads. So all it is just a little knot at the end and trimmed. So that's my hanger. And I'm now ready to join my two corners together. So you can see here I've already done this side. I've joined the outside corner to the inside corner. So, and I'm just going to show you how to do that. So I've got my 3mm ribbon on a, if I can find the end, on a needle. It's just a thick knitting needle for sewing together your knitting, and I'm just going to thread through one of my inside corners and one of the outside corners, and there we are. So now I just want to tie a knot, so just a little knot there. And the best way that I've found for doing my bows is to make two loops. So I'm going to carefully fold over a loop, then fold over another loop. So I've got two loops there, and I'm just going to tie a knot with my loops. So there we are. Now that might look a little bit big, but if you then carefully pull the ends, then tighten again, carefully pull the ends and tighten again, you can see that it just gradually gets smaller and smaller. So then once you've got it to the size that you want, not too big, you can then, let me just, that's it, give the bow part of it just a little prod to make it a bit more rounder, then trim it, and I tend to trim mine with a diagonal line cut, and that is your diamond reflection completed. So you can see there's the hangy bit in the middle, and there's your nice curved, you can just, if anything looks a little bit unstraight, you can just give it a nice little curve to it. Once you've joined the two corners together, that's your diamond reflections complete and ready to hang. If you want to put it away flat, all you need to do is to undo the bows and take out the ribbon, and then to recreate the 3D effect, you just need to pop in some new ribbon to recreate the bows. I hope that's all made sense and you've enjoyed working some new techniques which you'll be able to now take away and use in other lace making patterns. Thanks for joining me on this lace along, and have fun creating your lace.